ago Saturday, May 20th, most missed it, but some Americans observed Armed Forces Day, where those who are currently serving in America's armed forces were recognized. Tomorrow we will observe Memorial Day and remember those who made severe sacrifices, usually the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I am not a pacifist. Peace is a vague, unclear word like heaven that can't be broken down into simple terms. 40 years ago, I was part of the Conservative Men's Bible Study Fellowship, and the Old Testament defined peace as when a few rich men could relax under their vine or under their fig tree. It didn't say anything about poor men or women. The best we can hope for is a significant reduction in violent conflict. As long as there are too many people competing for the same resources, and there is also testosterone, I believe there will be violent conflict somewhere in the world. If I were King of America, I would feel a responsibility to not only build a strong military, but also make sure they did not become involved in ever-expanding Burr, Fox, and the Tar Baby wars like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, or the forever war we are waging in Afghanistan. I would work for a true citizen military. We came closest to a true citizen military during World War II, when just about everyone served. When Richard Nixon stopped college deferments and men from the middle and upper classes had to serve, the Vietnam War started to lose its support. Do you remember the conservative commentator, Paul Harvey? Some said that the war was over the day his son reached draft age. To build a citizen military, I would urge that the privileged should volunteer. The privilege would include winning athletes, perhaps especially winning athletes from major sports schools, but also institutions like Bob Jones University, Liberty University, Notre Dame, and Central Catholic and Jesuit high schools. And don't leave out any students who attended private schools at taxpayer expense. Using privileged athletes would improve the general quality of the military and weed out clumsy losers like myself. Privileged women athletes should volunteer and would improve the awareness of women's issues. Tammy Duckworth, the first women double amputee of the Iraq War, said that America's daughters are just as capable of defending us as America's sons. I would have to, since a draft would not pass and most of the privileged would not volunteer, as king, I would have to use different measures. I would have to point out that privileged religious athletes were chosen by God. I would also cite Luke chapter 12, verse 48. From everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required. Early in his career, Napoleon Bonaparte staffed a dangerous gun emplacement by calling it the battery of men without fear. That is the carrot approach. I would have to use the stick approach and tell the privileged who did not volunteer that they were simply cowards like Ted Nugent and number 45. When the privileged, especially those who had participated in national championships, started coming home in flag-draped caskets, it would be very difficult politically for those who sent them there. When the privileged start dying, we will know the true cost of war. A true citizen military would be the best way to keep us out of foolish wars. Sincerely, King Dave.
David is a proud member of our program committee, and he organizes the MCs for one thing, and he substitutes from time to time when more younger folks aren't here and does the chairs. It brooks no demeaning. Our speaker has asked that we hold our questions until the end. And then, as you know, we go from side to side with a person with a microphone, so our speaker won't be calling on people. And make your question pertinent and to the point without a speech. If you do want to make a speech, we certainly have an hour and a half for you at a future HGP Sunday morning meeting. We'll introduce our speaker now, and from our program committee, Professor Joyce Lackey. Joyce?
People of different cultures are now mixing all over the world. And as we saw here in Portland on Friday, not always safely for the newcomers or for their advocates. Nura Elmagbari has understood the refugee experience since childhood. Born in Benghazi, Libya, she grew up in Colorado, with her immigrant parents struggling to make a home in this unfamiliar culture. Their version of a home included preparing for a college education. And Ms. Elmagbari now has a master's degree in neuropharmacology with emphasis in opioid pharmacology. She hopes to continue her PhD in neuroeducation and clinical psychology. Nura started the Portland Refugee Support Group with a number of friends who all became aware that people here in America fleeing other countries are scrambling to survive. Not only is she giving back what her parents gave her, but she says it is the right thing to do. Nura has 3 daughters, 3 cats, but only 1 husband. She is a middle school science teacher whose school for the past several years has dominated at the Northwest Intel Science Fair Expo. Not only is she a good teacher, but she says if she had been born in America, she would run for President of the United States. It sounds as though her heart is in the right place for the job. A warm hand for Nura Elmagbari.
All right. Hello. Oh, there's more people since I sat down. I thought there was only maybe 5. I was like, yes. Thank you for having me. My name is Nura Elmagbari, and that was a wonderful introduction. And when I was invited to speak here today, the topic of refugees in Portland is so broad, and it's really hard to just kind of limit what I wanted to say to create the greatest impact. And so I just thought I'd cover a few basic things about the Portland Refugee Support Group, refugees in general, and how you guys can help if you're interested. So who we are, the Portland Refugee Support Group, as Joyce said, we started about 2 years ago, and it was just 5 of us. And what happened was we found out that there was a family from Iraq who was really struggling. They didn't have food, they had a new baby, they didn't have formula, diapers, things like that. And we're like, gosh, you know, these guys are falling on hard times. And so we just started helping them. And then they told us about another family. And they told us about another family. And soon we realized, oh my gosh, this is a problem. And us 5 women decided we need help. We just couldn't take in all these families that needed our help. And so we ended up forming this organization. And now we have over 200 volunteers, and we support 42 families currently, and our list is growing. As our capacity grows, we'll be able to take on more people. So my role in the organization is logistics, communication, and outreach. So I basically form the structure of the organization. I take care of the legal stuff, so I'm the mean one in the group. I make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And I maintain that communication between the resettlement agencies, refugees, the community at large, and anyone who is interested in learning about refugees. The mission and goals of PRSG is, the most important one is about empowering refugees. And we do this through education, life skills, training, and social support. The humanistic goals, it's interesting I have the word humanistic in there, and I'm here today, is to help others understand more about refugees and the refugee crisis. We believe education is the key, and the more we teach and the more we talk about the topic, the more it becomes quote-unquote normal. I hate that word, but we have to normalize things in order for people to kind of accept them. Organizationally, we have a structure that has worked very well, and we have actually 4 board members, and you'll see my name in 2 spots. We lost a board member, and I took over her roles. And how we work is we have several committees, and these committees have chairs and co-chairs, and these committees have specific functions and how we help our refugee families. And then we have a pool of volunteers that's quickly becoming an ocean, and we love it. We absolutely love that we have all this help. All right, so a couple of things we do. This is not we do a lot more, but this is just kind of the basic. We welcome refugees, whether it be at the airport, in their new homes. We shop for them, and this is because you can imagine somebody fleeing from war. They're not going to be like, oh, I need to go down to Winco. They have no idea how to do anything or where to go to do that. We help set up their homes. So by the time they enter the country, they have hopefully a place to live, and we furnish their homes for them and we make sure there's groceries for at least 1 week in the apartment, and so on and so forth. We make appointments for them. We have social support eventually as they get more acclimated to U.S. life. For example, potlucks, introducing them to other refugee families, introducing them to non-refugee families. A lot of community development, financial planning, and filling the gap. So believe it or not, filling the gap is our biggest job. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. But I'm going to tell you this right now. I have found through my experience, through the research I've done over the last couple of years about refugees, unfortunately, they're set up for failure. They really are. They're brought to this country and kind of just thrown to the wolves and you survive, kind of an attitude. So we have 4 different types of volunteers in our organization. We have a core volunteer, which is someone who takes on the main responsibility of a family. And usually we assign 2 core volunteers per family. We have committee volunteers. Those are the chairs, the ones that run the committees, and then the volunteers that specifically designate themselves just to that committee. We have on-call volunteers. Those are the backups in case an emergency comes up. And we have hosting volunteers. These are very important, and we don't have enough of these volunteers. These are people who are willing to take in refugees that have newly arrived and may not yet have a place to live. And sometimes it's 5 to 7 days, sometimes, as with one of our board members who loves to host, hers was a month and a half. So you never know who you can end up with, but it is a very rewarding experience if you have the chance to do it. So if you kind of think of the family being the center of our attention, these are the 8 main committees that work with a family. And you can see how daunting these tasks are. And we found that it's very important for the success of these families. And then the 2 core volunteers that I talked about earlier, they're the ones that kind of coordinate all of these efforts. So it is a team effort. And without all these pieces, it does not work. And I'd be happy at the end to answer more detailed questions. I just kind of want to give you an overview about why we do what we do. So now to the refugees themselves. Who are refugees and where do they come from? So according to the United Nations, gosh, I forgot the High Commission for Refugees. Thank you very much. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. A refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Most likely they cannot return home or are afraid to do so. War and ethnic, tribal, and religious violence are leading causes of refugees fleeing their country. And currently, the highest number of refugees come from Syria, Somalia, and Iraq. And I have this wonderful YouTube video that I really recommend, and I'm happy to share the link. I did bring a copy of this presentation that gives a wonderful kind of overview about the refugee situation. Something that's not included in this definition, and I really believe it should be, is climate refugees. So we have, hundreds of thousands of people fleeing their countries because there's no water, there's no food, there's nothing. The temperatures now are reaching into the 115, 120s on an average in some of these countries. And they can't live, they can't survive there. And so, but for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe these people don't believe in climate change, but it exists, and these people are suffering because of it, and there are refugees who leave for that reason. So why is this important? The number one focus for us as a group is to humanize these people. And unfortunately, they've been dehumanized by the media, by our own government, and by other people in our communities. People need to understand how much refugees go through. Whatever the reason is you leave your home, it's your home. And last night I had dinner with 2 refugee families who had invited us. It was the first night of Ramadan was last night. And we had a lot of other projects and things that we were invited to, but we found it very important as my family to go attend this dinner with them. And they were talking to us, the little girl, she's 9 years old, and she said, I used to live in such a big home. I had my own room. I had a yard. There were grapes growing in my backyard. We had a cat. It just broke my heart to see this little girl who left 5 or 6 years ago, her home in Syria, talking to my daughter, telling her everything she had, but she's so happy just to be alive. And there was 15 of us in this tiny little apartment, no air conditioning, no heat, nothing, but they were so happy. They were so happy. And no matter what they've been through, these people are survivors and they're resilient. But if they are not helped, if they are not supported here, they can easily enter a slippery slope that causes them to fail. And God knows at that point what will happen. They deserve the same dignity and respect as any other human being. We see how they're treated, the journalist who tripped that father who was trying to run with his son. For whatever reason, people don't see them as human, or they see them as less than human, so they don't deserve the same rights as we do. They have families, their fathers, mothers, sisters, sons. Some of them come from very high socioeconomic and education backgrounds. I mean, we have people that were millionaires and have nothing to eat. We have people with PhDs, medical doctors, dentists, engineers. They can't get a job here because they can't speak English, or they're folding laundry at a hotel. Imagine what that does to the psyche of a person. Some of the people we work with, they cannot read or write in any language, let alone English, even in their own language. And many of them come with mental and physical disabilities, yet they strive. So here's a little bit of perspective, and this data is from the year 2015. In June, the United Nations High Commission is going to give us the data for 2016, and we're really kind of, I don't want to say looking forward to that data, but we don't know which way it's going to go. We presume it's going to go up. We hope it doesn't, though. So currently there are 65.3 million people who are displaced in the world. And displaced means that they have left their home, not necessarily their country. So every single person, so all refugees are displaced, but not all displaced are refugees. Does that make sense? There are 21.3 million refugees worldwide currently. There are 10 million stateless people, which means they don't have citizenship in a country. That's whether that's because their country lost no longer exists, somebody took them over, or they have no proof of citizenship somewhere. And then currently, around the world, in 2015, there were 107,100 refugees that were resettled. So if you take a look at that number, 107,000, look at how many there are. So it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the people who still need help. Here in Oregon, our own backyard, since 1996, and the number has gone up, there have been about 65,000 refugees resettled here. And since 1975, tens of thousands. We're currently, as of 2016, 65,832 here in Oregon. And this is the entire state. They used to all get resettled here in Portland, but over the past few years, there's a trend of moving down to like Marion County and outside into the Hillsborough West area. And that's because there's just more room, or there's jobs, or there's more economic stability there because there's better benefits. The greatest number of refugees that have come to Oregon have been from Cuba, Burma, Bhutan, Iran, Iraq, and Somalia. But over the last 2 years, the number of Syrians has increased greatly. And we all know why that has happened. So one big question everybody has is vetting. And you hear President Trump say this all the time. Well, we can't tell. We give them a week to know. No. The process for a refugee to get into the United States is unbelievably cumbersome. You're looking at about minimum of 2 years for those refugees who have excellent paper trail, proof of who they were, where they were, and money. Some of them, I told you they come out with money. Others, sometimes, there was one woman that we met and we take care of. She was in a refugee camp for 23 years. So you just don't know, okay? And during this time, you don't know sometimes where your family is. You could be in one camp and your family could be another. You don't know if they're dead or alive. You're separated due to the vetting process. So I'm not going to go over this step by step, but I'm going to show you it's a 20-step process. And the first thing that happens, you register with the United Nations. There's an interview. The United Nations decides whoever the person is working that day, and believe me, mood and temperament play a big role in this. So if the person is in a good mood and they've had a good night's sleep, there's a very high chance you're going to get accepted into refugee status. If they've just seen 52 refugees within the past couple of hours, by the time you get there, unfortunately, they may not be as likely to accept you. It is such a game of chance and circumstance. It's unfortunate. Then there's a referral for the resettlement to the United States. The United Nations, the person who is working for the United Nations says, you know what, I think you'll be a good fit in the United States. Maybe they have family here, maybe they speak English, maybe the United States has the ability to accept people at that time. They have then at that time interview with State Department contractors, which is still overseas. Then there's the first background check. If they pass that, they go into a higher level background check, which includes international databases. Then another background check, and then they are fingerprinted and their photo is taken. Then their fingerprint is screened through Interpol and other background agencies. Then they do a third fingerprint screening. The case is reviewed by the United States. Some are asked for additional review, sometimes simply by name. I'll give you an example. My husband, his last name on his legal documents is Mohammed. His first name is Omar. It just happens to be the same name as the number 2 person in Al-Qaeda. And so when he first traveled in the United States, when he came here as a fiancé for me when we got married. And the first time he was put on a plane, he was detained for 6 hours. And he was arrested every time after that for several hours until he proved who he was. And when he did get his citizenship, he changed his name to his actual true name, which is Reda. That was his real last name is Reda. And since he changed his name, he's never been stopped at the airport. So it just goes to show you the interesting ways that people are chosen to be, held or not held. Once Homeland Security, and that's really the biggest hump, then a screening for contagious diseases is done. If you have a contagious disease like hepatitis C, HIV, AIDS, polio, anything, well, not polio, but what was I going to say? Meningitis, something like that, you will not be allowed into the country unless you have some kind of guarantees that you're going to seek health care or you can afford health care. Then you have to take a cultural orientation class, which in my word should be called This Is a Joke class, because they think in 30 minutes or 1 hour you can understand everything about American life and American culture. And that's what they try to do in that time. And at this point, you have to see, if you see pictures of people during this interview, they're so wide-eyed and they're holding on to their belongings. When we have a family of 7 that we support that came with a little suitcase. Everything they owned was in this little suitcase. And all they care about is like, oh my God, I'm so close. This is all they're thinking, I'm so close. They're matched with the resettlement agency, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then there's another check right before they leave because, while they're at the refugee camp, they may have been exposed to, a terrorist organization or something. They just want to make sure that they weren't. Chances are you weren't, but they just want to take extra precautions. And then a final security check at the American airport. The average travel time for these families is about 48 hours between leaving a refugee resettlement camp and getting here, assuming nothing happened on the way. So here in Oregon, we have 3 major resettlement agencies. These agencies are contracted by the United States government. So they have a deal with the government that says, you're going to do your part now. We're going to give you money, and you're going to help these people get resettled. And here in Oregon is Catholic Charities, which is the organization we work closest with, Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, also known as SOAR, and Lutheran Community Services, and they're actually the largest resettlement agency here in Oregon. And if we take a look at what everybody's responsible for, within the first 30 to 90 days, all resettlement agencies have to complete this list right here. And I know it's hard to see, but it starts with, you get a list on a computer, it has a name, and it says, guess what, someone's arriving in 6 hours. Sometimes it's that little of notice. And in that time, they have to find them a place to live. They have to furnish the apartment. They have to go shopping for them, get ready to pick them up at the airport, and complete all of this within then the next 30 to 90 days. Guess what? They can't. They're understaffed. The case managers there at times have, not at times, every time, at least 70 people that they're responsible for underneath on any given day. And after what Trump did with the refugee resettlement program, all of the case managers were cut in half time, and they were doubled in case load. So this is why what we do and other organizations like us are so vital, because if we weren't in there to help catch those who fell through, it would be a big problem. And then the state of Oregon is responsible for this half, and it's more about the food stamps and welfare and whatnot. Okay, so one big problem, and this is going to be really one of the few things I'm going to focus on in terms of the refugees here in Oregon, are the finances. And this is where our problems start. Everything is, they come in and they're really excited, and, they are in a warm, safe place. So many of these people, if you've seen pictures of refugee camps, it's not the Holiday Inn. It is horrible conditions. And suddenly they're somewhere where it's quiet. There's no planes flying overhead. There's no bombs exploding. The room is warm or cool. There's running water that's clean. There's a flushing toilet. Do you think they want anything else? But eventually life starts to kick in. And the first thing we learned about when we were learning about refugee was the welcome money. And you hear about these people that put on these conservative websites, oh, refugees get $50,000, they get 20. No, they don't. And I hate the word welcome money. It's like, welcome to America, after we bombed your home, here's $1,000. And that's literally what they're given. Each person is given $1,125 when they arrive in this country. So if you're one person arriving in this country by yourself, or you're two, okay, so that's $2,250. That money is supposed to be used to pay your down payment or your deposit for an apartment, your first month's rent, to buy the food for that first week, to pay for transportation, to get a phone for you or a SIM card. And by the time that's all done, and then to pay for all of this, pillow, sheet, couch, whatever. And Catholic Charities has a warehouse in which they get they give people all this stuff, but it's not free. It's not free most of the time. And so what happens is, if you are two people, your money's already gone. If you're a family of 6 and 7, you may have a little bit of luck, because you're going to get $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. But once again, you're a family of 6 and 7. How long is that going to last? So this is welcome money. And then you also get, or they get, benefits. They get TANF. TANF is cash. And this money is supposed to be used for emergencies, like for when you can't cover your rent. What refugees don't understand, unfortunately, many of them, is that if they don't use their TANF every month, it goes away. So much of the TANF, these people think they're saving, and unfortunately, that's not what's happening. And so when they do run out of rent through their welcome money, they go to dip into this, and it's not there. And they're not told this. We tell our families this. And so what we recommend is pull it out. Go buy a stick of gum, pull out the rest of the money, and save it. Why? Because they're going to need it. It's not a joke. What happens is, especially the ones that lose their homes, they become homeless. And then they get put into shelters if they're lucky. And we have single women and children. And these conditions sometimes are just as deplorable as refugee camps. Once they get kicked out of a home or they lose their home, that downward spiral is so difficult, because who's going to rent to them? Who's going to trust that they're going to be able to pay their rent? And then the psychological effects are a completely different monster that we need to deal with. Once they do get a job, this money ends right away. The next one is the DHS benefits, which are the food stamps. Now the food stamps, and you'll find them on the same card. So if you see someone with an Oregon Trail card, it's food stamps and their TANF, if they have TANF. And this is only for food items. And so the maximum, now let's look about how much TANF they get. If you're one person, you get $339 a month. And you get $194 in food stamps. How many of you can pay your rent with that much money? Not even a room. You can? Where do you live? Hook me up. That's one thing that we have a lot of trouble with is affordable housing. And given the crisis we have currently in Portland with housing, it makes our jobs even worse. So I have one of the families that I personally, I'm the case manager for her. 5 days here in America, and her husband passed away. So she's a widow with 5 children. And every month, so there's 6 people, every month she gets that much cash and that much in food stamps. Her rent currently is $1,250. Now, we supplement her rent through an organization called ISOS, Islamic Social Services of Oregon State. They help us supplement rent for a lot of people, but she's one of the lucky ones. She landed in our lap. How many people out there are not going to have our help? And keep in mind that cash assistance, once you start working, disappears. So it's not an additional income to help them. So the Oregon Trail Card, like I just said, it's like a debit card, credit card. You go to the grocery store and you use it. Here's the current rental gap in Portland, according to Catholic Charities. And so if you're getting $339 a month, the average price $550 plus for rent, you're starting off every month with a $200 deficit. And what I did here is we broke this down, and this is for a family of 4, okay? This is month 1. They're going to get a total cash allowance of $4,921. After everything they spend here, and our biggest cost is mattresses, by the way, because they have to be new. By law, they have to be new. After 1 month, they've spent $4,380. So what are they left with? $541. The next month, their rent, remember, is $1,100. Their utilities, their total expenses is $1,330. After they get their cash assistance, they have $1,162. They're short $168. Where are they going to get that money? Month 3, they're short $709. This is why what we do is so important. And there are organizations out there that are intended to help refugees in this aspect. And if you want to support an organization and you think refugees is where you want your money to go, you see how vital it is, how important that money is. So our support overall is crucial to their success. One thing that people don't know is they don't come here for free. They're given a travel loan. And so there's an organization that buys their tickets for them, and this organization is supported by the government. And after 5 to 6 months, they have to start making payments. You can call in and say, hey, I can't afford $60, $100, $200. So they may lower it, and it's an interest-free loan, but these tickets are often 2 to 3 times more expensive than if you and I booked the ticket. Yes. And so the family that I had dinner with last night, they owe about $8,000 in tickets that they have to repay. So IRCO, Immigration and Refugee Community Organization, is it's a wonderful organization. It's really big. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about it, but this is the part of the refugee resettlement in which other organizations other than the resettlement organizations are involved in helping, and they get support from the government as well. IRCO does the trainings, the English classes, job trainings, cultural trainings, but once again, it doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you why it doesn't work. These English classes are mandatory, and the job training classes are mandatory. But if they don't make these classes every month, every class they miss, they're deducted $60 from their TANF. Now, why do you think somebody might not be able to make their classes? Who here has no idea where IRCO is? Okay, so imagine a refugee who doesn't know north, south, east, or west from where they are. How are they going to get to IRCO? So they're given bus passes, they're given a lot of things, but how are they going to get on the bus? They're supposed to be trained. And those who do get training, it's a one-time session. So that's something our organization works a lot with, is spending a lot of time teaching them how to take the bus. We teach some of them to drive so they can get their driver's license. And eventually, once they can afford a car, they'll be able to get a car. But unfortunately, it's a broken system. Everybody's truly trying their best. They are. But it comes down to money in the end. Something that's very important to know is once someone gets a job, the money stops, no more free bus passes, their file with the VOLOG closes, and the VOLOG is the resettlement agency. If these people get in trouble financially, they can't go back and say, hey, help me. They can't. Even though by law, they're supposed to be kind of under the umbrella of the resettlement agencies, up to 8-9 months. But there's just so many cases, so many cases. The caseworker is no longer there for support. We have many complaints of caseworkers no longer answering phone calls, and no longer answering emails because they're like, oh, we're done with you. And that's exactly where the system has set them up for failure. They bring them in, they set their hopes up high, they do whatever, and then they let them go. And then the IRCO classes are no longer mandatory. So a lot of things that we do, like I said, are through education, and it's not just education for the general public, it's also education for the refugees themselves. And that's a very important part of helping them get acclimated quickly to life in America. And so here's just an example of, we have a Facebook page, a YouTube page, and a new website coming up within the next few days, hopefully. But for example, right here, we have a young Syrian man who we videoed buying a bus pass and riding the bus in Arabic. And it's Syrian Arabic, because Arabic is not all the same. There's different dialects. And so this has been viewed many times by our refugees, because they get there on the bus and they turn it on their phones and they literally follow it step by step. And even TriMet uses this as an example of, you know, when somebody says, how do you ride the bus, you can access this on their website. And that's a video we have of a social potluck we had, and like 300 and some people showed up to that, and it was wonderful to see all the families get to know each other. So the struggles and successes that we've had and we've faced alongside the refugees, many of the refugees are resettled in Southeast Portland and in Salem. Most of our volunteers are in Tigard, Beaverton, and Southwest Portland. And it's very hard for me just to get down to see many of the families we support. It's an hour drive at least. And I'm doing this drive 4 to 5 times a week. The language. Okay, I'm good with English. I'm good with Arabic, Somali, Burmese, Congolese. I'm worthless. I can't help you. I try. There's a lot of body language involved, and pictures. But unless you speak the language, unfortunately, or they speak English, it's really, really hard. Cultural shock. We know of several refugees throughout the country who commit suicide because they just cannot adjust. Some of them want to go back to their refugee camps. Can you imagine? Life being so hard here, they want to go back to the refugee camp, but they do because they can't acclimate. They don't know how to deal here. Access to information, the refugees don't know without that help from us or somebody else that's willing to take time to talk to them, give them the information they need to succeed, and then of course transportation is a big one. So one success story, it's not all negative, okay? One success story is one of the families we support. They're a family of 6. And after 1 year, both parents are at PCC, they're learning English, and mom learned English, dad got a job, the kids now speak fluent English. Her daughter was just honored with Exceptional Student Award at OMSI. I don't know if you saw that in the paper, but that was one of their children. And just recently they bought a car, which was a huge accomplishment for them. And for us, that's a huge success because they have officially graduated, as we say. And a lot of times the families that graduate from our organization actually end up being volunteers for us as well. So that's a fantastic circle of life kind of a thing. So I know I went quickly and covered just really basic things, but I'm really happy to answer any questions you have because I figured you might have more questions than I'm able to cover here, so I'd rather answer your questions. All right.
Thank you for your good work and good presentation today. It seems like there's so many variables in this process and they're kind of all stacked against the refugee. But the part that I want to focus on is, let's say that everything goes well, they're able to acclimate, get a job, get a place to live. It seems like with our current political climates, they may be at risk for being deported for different reasons. How much of a risk is that?
Well, if they came here legally, and you are not a refugee unless you have entered through the refugee process, through the vetting, and you came through a resettlement agency. In that case, they're here legally, they have the proper paperwork. Chances are they're not going to get deported. That's never been a concern of any of our refugees. Now, asylum seekers and other immigrants who may have let their visa lapse, that's a whole different story. They're getting rounded up left and right. I think so far in Oregon, we've deported like almost 200 people just in Oregon. But for refugees, that's never been a concern of theirs to be deported once they've arrived here. And if it was a concern, it was probably because of misinformation. But they're told you're here in 8 months to 1 year, you're going to get your green card, and then you work your way towards citizenship. So it is a legal process involved, and there's really no worry about that. The biggest worry is survival. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to buy food? How am I going to get to my place of work? You know, some of these people take a bus for 2 to 3 hours just to get to their job. So it's not an easy life at all.
Hi, yeah, it sounds like a great organization. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Real practical question. When people are donating, myself including others, often one of the questions you ask is yourself is, what's the administrative cost of the programs? Could you just describe what that is for your program?
For us, zero. Everything we do is volunteer. Every single thing we have in our organization has either, well, I mean, there's some personal cost, obviously. We spend a lot of our own money, and we definitely spend a lot of our own time, which comes at the cost of my family, my children. But so far, we have been able to find resources to help people pay for rent, help people pay for car payment, parking ticket, you know, dental appointments. One example is we've, over the last year, collected over $100,000 worth of vital medical equipment. We have a quadriplegic client, and he needed a special bed. We were able to get that for him for free. Somebody donated it. And special wheelchairs. We have a young girl that has a severe, it's a muscular and bone condition, and she can't even hold herself upright. Someone donated a car seat, so it supports her head and her body, so she's able to see when she's driven to her appointments. So a lot of it is just, you know, kind of boots on the ground, hard work, looking for resources out there to help pay for these things, but we're running out. We're running out of, you know, we're kind of drawing up our friends. We can't, you're only ashamed to ask them for more. And we are becoming a 501c3, and then we will qualify for grants and donations and whatnot. But for now, all of our volunteers are volunteers. We don't pay anybody. And most of the time we don't buy our very expensive things. So I'm thinking maybe $1,000 a year, if that comes out of our own pockets to pay for things. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
So, first of all, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And I have a boatload of questions, but let me just try two. One is, at what point in the 20-step process does the U.S. government become involved? And second of all, I know a lot of people go to Sweden. Well, there's not a lot of people speaking Swedish.
Uh-huh.
So, but how do people who are non-English speakers or non-speakers of the language of the place they're going to get selected to go to that place?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's quite interesting, believe it or not. You kind of got to force your way in. So you see all the images of the refugees on boats, you know, on these trains to get into other countries. Here we go. Trains to get into other countries, crossing borders by foot. The family we were with last night, 20 hours on a bus, and then about 4 days on foot just to get into Turkey. Once they got into Turkey, they made their way into a refugee camp where they said, please help me. A lot of times, these refugee camps around the world do have people that speak many different languages. Otherwise, you're either going to look for someone who also speaks your language and might speak the language in that country, or body language and pictures. Everybody understands what a woman means when she's holding her child and she's on her knees and she's crying. We know she needs help. You know, and at that point, medical care and first response is more important than saying, where did you come from and why are you here? Hopefully. Unfortunately, millions of people are being turned away. These countries, Malta, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. These are millions of people. Think of what that does to your infrastructure, what it does to your economy, what it does to your morale as a country if it's not handled properly. You let everyone in, that might not be the best thing for your country, but you don't let everyone in, and how are your people going to view you as a government? America's kind of lucky in a sense that we are surrounded by oceans and vast land. People can't really get in as easily as in Europe and Asia. Just kind of walk over somebody's garden and you're in another country. So for that question, unfortunately, it's just if you can survive the trip one way or another and you get into a country that is sponsored by the United Nations, it has to be sponsored. The United Nations has to recognize it as a refugee camp or a refugee hosting country. You're out of luck. Some people make it into other countries and are able to survive on their own and build a new life if they're allowed to be in there. And a lot of time it's the kindness of strangers. Truly is the kindness of strangers. Has nothing to do with governments. If I could, once, the kids that we're working with, this family that I support personally, their English is getting better and better. But when they talk to me about their stories, the oldest boy is now 13. He lost his dad 5 days after coming to America. And his first thought is, now I'm the man. And I have to support my family. 13 years old. And when he got to Turkey, he was 8 years old. And he started working 12 to 14-hour shifts a day. For pennies, because it's all under the table. You're not legally allowed to work. So it's a nasty situation. It really, truly is a crisis. Does that answer your question? It's not easy. The language is always a problem, and unless we have qualified interpreters, especially with paperwork and whatnot, it's a real issue, and people are just, I guess, trying their best. That's the best question, the answer I have for you in terms of language. But they're working on getting a more trained interpretation task force to help. And then as far as the vetting is concerned, at step 4, once they're referred to enter the United States, then in step 5, which is probably a good 2 years before it even gets there, then the State Department takes over and they're contractors. So the State Department hires people that are in these countries to start with the background check process. Does that answer your question, sir? You're welcome. Yes, Joyce?
I have kind of there's nobody over there. A kind of a double question. Could one of your committees actually be responsible for doing fundraisers, and could you raise money that way?
Yes.
And then could I just ask, do you feel your daughters are getting as much benefit from seeing what you're doing as they are? Is it compensate? I know it's taking time from them in other ways, but they have to be gaining from this too.
So one thing I do is heavily involve my daughters. I take them with me. I show them we live a comfortable life here in America. My husband's a physician. And my daughters, they're typical American girls. They have iPads and the latest shoes and whatnot. And that's actually changed for me the last few years. I've changed my attitude towards what I give my daughters because I grew up with nothing. And so I wanted for my daughters everything. I wanted each to have their own fancy bedroom. I wanted them to have the latest clothes. I wanted them to have everything. But I realized I was creating entitled brats rather than these girls that were supposed to be happy with whatever they had. And actually being involved in this has helped them see how lucky they are. And now when I say no, they don't fight me anymore. Now they're like, okay, Mama. And they want to, can I give this toy away? Can I use my allowance to do this? And it's been a wonderful experience for them. So I do get them involved, and many of our volunteers do the same. You see a lot of our younger volunteers, they're there and they clean up and they set up and they pass out food and whatever, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful, especially with the monthly donation drive. We give donations once a month. We have these boxes with toiletries and detergent, the more expensive items that you would buy for a home, and we give a box to each of our families once a month, and that helps them save money to kind of get ahead and, one more chance for success. Does that answer your question? And did you have another one? Oh, so we do have a finance committee, and the finance committee has two parts. One is teaching our refugees to budget. They don't necessarily understand how to spend their money properly. And then, and taxes, once tax time comes along. One of our families actually got an $8,000 return because they hadn't done their taxes in 2 years. And so we have a volunteer that's a CPA, and she did their taxes, and it was wonderful for the family. And then the other half is eventually fundraising once our 501c3. I'm also the director of another organization called Daughters of Eve, which is an organization meant to empower girls, Muslim girls, to get out into the community and become involved, especially civically. And we actually fundraise through there. And we have currently at www.daughtersofeve.org a fundraiser we're doing for PRSG. We're trying to raise $3,000 for a potluck we're having for Ramadan. And that's going to be on the 16th. And so we need money to help pay for that. And so there is a mini fundraiser on there. So if you can donate on that, that would be wonderful. So hope that answers your question. Yes, sir?
Excuse me, I'm fascinated by how you've started with almost nothing as far as the organization goes and built a really class act.
Thank you.
Now, this is a little off subject, but the homeless population that we have here in Portland is somewhat of a recent phenomenon. We've always had homeless, but not like it is now, and this has happened in the last 10 years. And just from your perspective, do you think that, you have any idea, like I said, we're baffled. Do you have any idea how we could do an organization that like you did, that could get these people back on their feet?
Unfortunately, with the homeless situation, and a lot of research has been done on this, it seems like a problem that will never go away. And it's so multifaceted into why people are homeless. You have people that are mentally ill. You have people that don't care. They want to be homeless. You have people that have been homeless for so long that they don't know any other way to live. And then those who, of course, can't afford to live anymore in a home or were kicked out or evicted or whatever. Right now, the housing crisis in Portland is the worst in the nation. It is the worst in the nation. And there was a meeting several months ago with the governor and the mayors and everybody trying to figure out, okay, what can we do? And somebody suggested these pods. They got the idea from the refugee camps. They're these kind of portable homes, and they set up like 1,000 of them, and then the homeless can go and use those as homes. But then what does that become? Another homeless camp. And the solution to homelessness is almost impossible to see, because in order to have a solution, we need to understand the problem. And we don't really know the problem with every single person that's homeless, because every single person is different. The reason is different. The idea of knowing, okay, I don't care if I lose my home because I can go into a homeless shelter. And then, if I don't get into the homeless shelter, I can go sleep at the church, or I can do this. And then suddenly there's such a mental factor, and these people give up. And they start in this vicious circle of poverty and almost entitlement, where, you know what, I don't care. I paid taxes for 1 million years. I was a veteran. I was this. I was that. I deserve to have a home for free. I deserve to have food stamps. I deserve to have TANF. And many of them have this thought process that goes through their minds. So how do we get out of that? You have to empower them. How do you empower them? You get them education. You get them jobs. You get them training. But how many of them want to do it? So the first thing you do is counseling and mental health. How many of them are addicted to drugs? How many of them are overweight or disabled? How many of them have children? How many of them are single women? How many of them are pregnant? It's such a large problem. I really think at this point government officials are just closing their eyes. They don't want to deal with it anymore. But it did come to a head when there were several homeless that died this past winter because they had nowhere to go. And finally they thought, oh, finally, it's sad. We as humans are like, we don't care until somebody's died or something tragic has happened. And unfortunately, that was what kicked off that past meeting. Hopefully, we'll start with those who are willing to improve their lives. And if we can get them off the streets, we'll work on the rest. That's kind of the idea right now. Oh, yes, ma'am?
I have a quick question and a more complex question. Quick question, do the refugees qualify for Medicaid, and if so, right away?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yep, they come right away. They have Medicaid, and they're 100% covered in like the basic medical needs. Unfortunately, they can't be seen everywhere, and they sometimes, so we had one child from Iraq who has severe asthma. He went to 5 emergency rooms before he was finally accepted into the 5th one. They wouldn't take his form of Medicaid. So depending on the kind of Medicaid, whether it's Oregon OHP, or there's one program through Kaiser, and there's Oregon Kids, there's different programs. Depending on what they were given, and you don't have a choice, it's just whatever was available at that time, they all have some form of medical care. But like with the medical equipment that I talked about that we got donated to us, that's none of that's ever covered. And that's why we have to kind of work really hard to get that for them, to make their quality of life a little better.
More complex question. Does your group work with mosques and with
Yes.
ethnic organizations? Like I think there's a Somali organization in Beaverton
Yes.
that's fairly strong.
Mm-hmm.
And are all of the Muslims in the refugee group here, are they all Sunni Muslims? Or are there also Shiites? And is there any discord between the two groups, if so?
So that's an excellent question. We actually don't discriminate based on religion or race or country of origin. We have refugees that we support from all kind of, well, not all, but many ethnic backgrounds. The majority of our clients are Arab and Muslim, and that's because that's where the greatest need just happened to be. And yes, we work very closely with the mosques in town, with the different groups. The Iraqi group of Portland is an amazing group. They do wonderful work. The Somali group. We work with many churches throughout, Oregon and West Lynn and Beaverton. We have great partnerships with them. And we have to. This is a team effort. And we are all neighbors. And once people start viewing refugees as their neighbors, they're going to be more willing to let them borrow a cup of sugar. And so we just need to change the mentality of how we view each other. Yes, I'm Muslim and I'm Sunni, but we have a Shia. 1 or 2 of our clients are Shia. We have an atheist. We have many Christians, many Catholics. We help them. We don't discriminate, and no one ever has cared in between, because from my own experience, once you see someone that's like you, you automatically feel more safe and more comfortable. There's something I know, it's not different. So most refugees don't care. They just automatically have this connection to each other because they know that they've all been through the same thing. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes. You mentioned getting your daughters out into person-to-person contact in the community. You mentioned that you have an atheist that you're working with. Our organization is looking for members. If you have people who want social connections in the United States, we could always use more social connections of people who will broaden our outlook on the world. But in general, I would say that as far as person-to-person contact with refugees, we're as clueless about how to start that as many of your refugees are about how to start life in America.
That's a wonderful.
Can you give us a little bit of advice about
Yes,
how to
absolutely.
get started if we want to try to
Help.
start some processes that'll make America better by bringing these people in?
So for us, like I said, this first family was thrown into our laps, and it forced us to learn about the refugee process. And once we learned about the refugee process, we reached out to the resettlement agencies. And at that time, by the time we learned there were even resettlement agencies, I think we had 12 families under our belt at that time. Yeah, and a lot of it is person-to-person information. You know, now you all met me. I have some cards with me. I'll leave my cards. You guys are welcome to contact me anytime. But once we started contacting the refugee resettlement agencies, they were, you know, some were agreeable, some were not so agreeable to work with us. They were always afraid. And some, unfortunately, volunteer agencies are not as well organized, and they cause more trouble than help. But we've, thank God, kind of proved ourselves to them, and so now they ask us for help. But it's a process, and a lot of it is based on trust and word of mouth. And once you feel like you understand the system, I think that's where you have to start and find where the need is. So we fill a niche that is not filled by anybody else. We service many of the Arab-speaking and Syrian refugees that were very recent newcomers to America. And we also service refugees, Muslim refugees that, and not everyone in our organization, by the way, there's more non-Muslim volunteers than Muslim volunteers in our organization. But some Muslim refugees just feel more comfortable working with Muslims. And so it depends on just kind of the situation you're at. For you guys, you know, now you have a connection. You have me. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people who would like to broaden their horizons or create a new social network and say, hey, you know, there's a group called Humanists of Portland. Why don't you go check them out and see what you think about them? Here's their website. That's what we do. We have a ton of resources and a ton of information that we just hand out freely. We're happy. We don't want the credit. We don't want work. I mean, I'd rather pass off work to other people any day because there's so much work to be done. You know, you find a lot of these agencies are like, no, they're mine, and they're very territorial. And no, I'm like, go meet people. Learn about the world. There's people different than us, even here in America, you know, just go. And so that's what we do, and we found it very successful because these people have free wills and free minds, and they can do what they want. And thank God now they're in a free country. And so they can exercise their freedoms as they please. And we encourage that. We don't, you know, hold them back in any way. Structurally, if you want to volunteer, like for us, for example, oh gosh, well the easiest thing you could do is just volunteer with a resettlement agency or with us. And we can get you into a committee. If you like tutoring, we can get you assigned to a family to tutor or homework help or ESL. If you like teaching people how to drive, we need people to do that. That's something you can sign up for. But in order to actually, what we call refugee engagement, where you have one-on-one work with a refugee, you do have to be an official volunteer, and you must have a background check done on you. It's not 20 steps like you know, the vetting process. Ours is a little simpler. You just pay $39.99 or whatever it is, and you get this background check that is sent to us, and we say, okay, this person's copacetic and they're safe to work, especially around children. There's a lot of refugee children, and they trust you blindly. And so we need to make sure that we trust you blindly to go in and help our families. But just, you can, you know, there's a lot of churches involved, but I would start with the resettlement agencies. You know, we don't have a religious affiliation. I'm Muslim, yes, but as an organization, we're not a religious organization. And then all of the charities, Catholic Charities, SOAR and Lutheran, yes, they're religious entities, but they are not, they don't care where you come from or your background. If you want to be a volunteer, just sign up. And they have tons of volunteering opportunities to work with refugees, and then maybe you can work your way up from there, see what you like. Yeah. Yes, sir?
Earlier in your talk, you mentioned a video.
Uh-huh.
And would you have a simple name for it we could search for rather than a complicated URL?
You know, that would have been really smart. If you go to the United Nations High Commission website, the video is on that website, but it's basically, it's like, it's titled like, oh gosh. It's something, if you just put you in Google, United Nations UNHCR video, and in a video will pop up that's a really quick 5-minute video that sums up the refugee crisis really well, really beautifully. In fact, if I wasn't afraid of, you know, plagiarism, I would have just showed you the video, and that would have been a wonderful way to teach you guys about the crisis. Yes, sir?
I live in southwest Portland amongst about 5,000 Somalis,
I know it seems that way.
And the Somalis are doing pretty well here. They have their own cab company. They've celebrated their first police officer.
Yes.
Markham School is loaded up with those refugees. Explain to me why people would leave Minneapolis and walk through the snow after getting out of a taxi in an illegal crossing to Canada when they're Somali, or refugees that are walking into Quebec from Vermont. I don't understand that when they're here and they feel they have to run away from America.
That's an excellent question. Believe it or not all, okay, let's talk about the Somali community. And they're a very tight-knit, well-connected community that has been here for about 40, 50 years. We have to remember this. And not all people of color are Somali. Some are Kenyan, Ugandan, Congolese, whatever. And they may not feel comfortable in that community or to get help from that community, and the community may not be as open to helping them because they have so much of their own that they need to help. The ones who were leaving after Trump's ban on refugees. And these people left out of fear. They really thought they didn't know any better. And they left because they were afraid they were going to be detained here in America. And then in Canada, you had Justin Trudeau that was saying, come, we'll give you everything. And so this was the message they were getting, and it wasn't many of them that fled, but those who did flee, once they were interviewed, fled for that reason. Plus, they ended up in cities that were not very welcoming. They probably personally had very negative experiences that made them feel that all of America is going to be like this. Portland, Oregon, we are blessed because the people here in Portland are far more liberal and open and accepting than many of the cities across the country. And in fact, the Syrian, was a big honor to us. There is a secret Syrian Facebook page. I don't even know it. Unless I'm a Syrian refugee, you're not getting in that Facebook page. I don't know who controls it, but they talk about their experiences. And many of them that have gone to other cities, now you can imagine the welcome money, the TANF, that is across the board, across the country. So imagine trying to live on that in New York, where there are resettled refugees, or in LA, where there are resettled refugees. They talk to each other. Where should I go? What should I do? What kind of work should I get? And there was a thread, hey, if you want to come anywhere, come to Portland, Oregon, and look for the Portland Refugee Support Group. And they've just had good, positive experiences with us trying to help ease their transition. So I'm thinking a lot of personal experiences. They may have probably had very negative, possibly violent experiences, and they're just afraid. I mean, you're fleeing. When you're fleeing for a reason. Nobody leaves their home unless there's a very good reason. And nobody flees safety unless they don't feel safe. And a lot of times this was the case, unfortunately. But you're right, the Somali community does have a very wonderful support system for each other, as do the Iraqis. And the Burmese, they're getting there. The best community I have found, refugee-wise, they never need our help, are the Turkish refugees. The Turkish, oh my God, they are what a well-oiled machine. You'll never hear about a problem in the Turkish community. They resolve it internally beautifully. Here, as soon as a mom hits her son, or maybe there's a domestic dispute among a husband and a wife, and DHS 911 is called, and then the kids are taken away, and the man is put in jail, and everything falls apart. And one reason is we don't have the cultural training or competency to understand this. They come from a culture where this is okay, where it's legal. And my husband's a psychiatrist, and he works a lot with DHS to say, hey, don't just jump the gun and assume, here's a man, Jimmy from Urco made me laugh. He used this example. He goes, you guys have to understand, where there's a man coming from the middle of Nigeria who says, I paid 3 goats and a cow for my wife. How dare you tell me how to speak to her? This is the culture they're coming from, and we have to understand that. We have to respect it until we say, okay, here in America, if you do that, you're going to get your kids taken away, and you're going to be thrown in jail. And it just takes time to teach them, and it's gotten better. The Portland Police Department has been amazing. They're working with us, and DHS and all these other agencies are working with us as well to help prevent that from happening.
Yes,
Yes.
no, I don't mean to discredit your religion or anything, but you're certainly aware of the murders that took place
I was,
yesterday?
yes.
And one of the factors may have been the headscarf. So, are you changing your thoughts about the headscarf, or are your daughters going to have the opportunity to change their feelings about that, or whatever? Would you comment on that, please?
Sure, absolutely. For me, my headscarf is 100% my choice. It is part of my religion. I believe it is a commandment from God, but it is my choice at the end of the day. And will I change it because of this incident? Never. I didn't change it after 9/11. I didn't change it after the World Trade Center bombings. I never changed it. Why? Because it's not me who needs to change. It's these people that need to change. And if I take off my scarf, I'm giving in to their fear-mongering and their pressures on me to assimilate to whatever they believe is the right way to live. And the beauty of America, I mean, people understand there's Muslim countries where the headscarf is banned. But here in America, I'm free to wear it. I'm free to walk down the street in any way I feel fit for me. And because of freedom of religion, I feel safe. And I feel proud to dress like this and walk down the streets. And heaven forbid a situation like that happened to me. It was awful. I'm very concerned for the two girls involved. I'm sure there's a lot of guilt and a lot of fear that they're going through. The Muslim community held a fundraiser for the family of the victims. Over $100,000 was raised for them. And, you know, we have to fight back. And this is one man in, you know, a bundle of billions of people who did a terrible thing. But I'm not going to lump all white American males into the same basket. That's unfortunately been done to us. You know, somebody said it earlier. As soon as I hear the word terrorism on TV, I automatically think, oh, great, a Muslim. And I think the only way we can change that attitude is being strong for each other and standing up for each other. And this was the ultimate sacrifice, as King Dave said. I believe that these two men died for the very same principles that our soldiers died for. And it's for us to live freely and in a safe country and be who we want to be without persecution from anybody else. Otherwise, we're going to start seeing Americans become refugees. And we're not going to allow that to happen.
This was an excellent presentation
Thank
and a lot of good information in your PowerPoint. And I know we'll have a copy of the video that we'll post to our website, but is there any way we can get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
Oh, sure. I brought one, and I can put it on this computer maybe, download it on this computer. But I did bring one. I was hoping to use it for cheating, but I didn't need it. I'm a teacher. I'm always prepared. But yes, I'll be happy to leave that for you.
You described a situation, and your whole organization exists really because of holes in the quote-unquote official system.
Yes.
And these holes you're describing are absolutely blatant.
Oh, yes.
And why is that not? The efficient way to deal with it would be devote more resources, say, to training people. Why is there no voice on that level from those people who are doing the work?
Everything in this country, especially and around the world, comes down to money. And am I going to spend my money on war and bring more refugees, or am I going to spend my money to helping people that need it? It is your reading was so on point to why we have the problems we have today. It truly is. All of these problems, why we have refugees, and you know, one of the major reasons is war. The Iraq war, the highest number of refugees are from Iraq because of the Iraq war. It was an unjust, unfair war. We can get into politics later, but hey, what if we'd never bombed Iraq? What if we allow the people of Iraq to stand up for themselves? Eventually it will happen. Eventually it will happen. You know, the people of Libya, where I am originally from, we had a revolution. And we're currently in a civil war. But things will get better. And one thing Libya's done so far is we've kept foreign hands out of it. You know, sure, you want to help, okay, we might buy some weapons to help get rid of whoever, but it has not become a true interference where a foreign government has entered the country or occupied the country in order to democratize them or westernize them or whatever. We have to stop thinking that everybody needs to be like us. There's thousands and thousands of years of culture and history that we disrespect when we tell other people, no, you need to dress like me, I need to eat like me, I need to drive a car like me, and so on and so forth. The ultimate answer to your question, the gaping holes, it's money. Once you get money, you will find the resources, you will find the people to help. And are there people advocating? Yes. But our voices are always shut down very quickly. But we won't stop. I mean, one of our main things we do is advocacy, and we will just keep saying, hey, you have two choices. You either stop bombing people and bringing people here, or give us more money to help them and help improve their lives over there. So what's it going to be? We can ask Dave. I'm sure they have a better, sure he can answer that better. Huh? Wait till I think I might come. I want to hear this. Any other questions or?
I think we're about out of time.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.